Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. This is BRN AM for Wednesday, September 25th, 2019. Here are the top stories. The United States is no longer in the top 10 best countries to go for retirement. And millennials are sharing their retirement plans on Twitter. And let's just say it's not good. The land of the free, the home of the brave, is no longer in the top 10 best countries for retirement. How can this be? Joining me now to discuss is MarketWatch's intrepid retirement reporter, Alessandro Melito. So, hey, Ali, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for making time for us this morning on the show. You wrote an article on a recent survey that the United States is not among the top 10 best countries to retire. Can you give us a little bit more detail there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the U.S. wasn't even in the top 10 when it came to best places for retirees. There were other countries, primarily in Europe and the Nordic countries, that were doing particularly well. And the reason that they do well is because of healthcare and quality of life. There were a lot of factors that went into this study from Natixis, and they do this annually. But the recurring themes that are, great for retirees, aside from the finances, are things like air quality, the environment, happiness, and then of course there are the financial matters, retirement savings rate, the old age dependency ratio, which is how many older people there are to younger people or vice versa. And for the U.S., so the U.S. is doing well economy-wise, but it has a pretty bad, income inequality ratio.
Yeah.
So the wage inequality is particularly bad in this country, which is why it didn't do so well on the rankings. I mean, we do have other things that are good for retirees. Our air quality, water quality is good. We do have many places for retirees to go as far as even just enjoying themselves and leisure and stuff like that. People do have retirement accounts and other tools that are available to them so that they do have this option to save. Social Security does exist and it's not going anywhere, even though people think it is going somewhere, that disappear, but it is here. And it will be here in the future. So those are all things that are good, but the income inequality and what else was it? Mostly the income inequality. That was the biggest driver for dropping the U.S. below the 10.
So when we look at the top cities, and I certainly, I took a look at the survey, and certainly think, obviously, agree with you on the economy and the water. But when you look at the top countries, they all seem to be Nordic countries. So you have Norway, and I think Switzerland was up there, and Finland. What's the takeaway there? I mean, is it just people there are just happier?
I mean, they definitely are happier. They've been known for that for a while, but it's also the healthcare. So they have a better healthcare system than over here in the U.S. Whereas it's a bit of a messy system and also an expensive system, particularly for retirees and older people and those with disabilities. So because of the fact that they are happier, but they also have their healthcare system intact and regulated and all that stuff, that was why they were at the top, and that's why they've been at the top for years.
Yeah. So are there lessons to be learned here? I mean, obviously Natixis does this every year, and the U.S. falling out of the top 10, barely in the top 20 here. But are there lessons for not only the United States, but other countries around the globe? Because the issues that we have here are probably not unique to just the United States.
Yeah, so I mean, it would be nice if there was a way to make people happier, though that is something probably more internal for individuals as opposed to something that the U.S. could do in general. It's not like they could create a happiness program or something like that. But looking at other countries for healthcare would be good. Looking at ways to boost the retirement savings rate would be good. Looking at other countries' pension systems would be
Yeah.
good. So I did a whole story about that. Social Security, while it will be there in the future, a lot of people say that it has the potential to be cut because of the trust funds running out of money and more money going out than coming in, and something needs to be done about that. There are other countries that have very different systems in place. So some are more generous, like Brazil had a very generous program, and now they're changing it up by creating a retirement age and making people work a little bit longer before they could get their pensions. Um, that's one thing. Looking at how to make that kind of program run smoother would probably boost the ranking for the U.S. too, because that is a concern for a lot of Americans. Things like that, I would say.
Yeah, and I think in the article that you wrote, I mean, you made the point that saving, and we're going to talk about millennials in the next segment, but obviously people being able to save, income inequality, obviously a challenge there. Not sure what individually we can do, but trying to put some money away towards retirement, regardless of what you're earning, is going to be very important. And I would agree with you. I mean, I think that one of my takeaways from reading your article and also reading the report is that, this is you need to be dynamic. Regulators, legislators, people who have responsibilities over retirement, and just the general public need to be dynamic in terms of thinking about retirement, because it evolves, it changes. That's just part of the fabric now. And you can't just assume that what works today is going to work tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Allie, will you stick around? We're going to go to commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about millennials and some of the work that you did in terms of what's going on in Twitter.
Okay, sounds good.
And when we come back, Allie sticks around, and we hear about millennials who are sharing their retirement plans on Twitter, and it's not good. Stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. And as we discussed on Monday's show, millennials make up over 70 million people in the U.S. population. That's the largest portion of the U.S. workforce. Many millennials, however, are sharing their retirement plans, and they're not good. Ali Melito from MarketWatch is still with us. Well, welcome back. And now we're going to shift gears. We talked about how the U.S. fared among the best countries in retirement, not very well. And still with us, Ali Melito. She's the intrepid retirement reporter for MarketWatch. Ali, thanks so much for sticking around. And you wrote a piece last week about something that went viral. Many millennials were sharing their retirement plans. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what prompted it, but millennials were all up in arms on Twitter the other day about their retirement plans. So there was this hashtag called millennial retirement plans, and people were sharing their thoughts. They were saying mostly bad things like I will never retire. And then there were people who were making fun of millennials for those stereotypes that
Of course.
they are usually tagged to millennials, like living in your parents' basement, never paying for anything, all that stuff. But as far as millennials were concerned, there were a lot of reasons why they said that they will never be able to retire. There were the reasons we hear a lot, around student loan debt, and how that the crippling student loan debt that they face will keep them from saving for retirement or eventually ever retiring, because maybe they'll have student loan debt for the rest of their lives. And then there were really upsetting ones about healthcare. So people who had health conditions already said that they need, a solid insurance plan, or they have a lot of expenses in their everyday lives that means that they will need to work for the rest of their lives, because this is something perhaps that will never go away for them. There are other people who said that they could never even think about retirement because they don't earn enough. Because they don't earn enough, they can't save enough. So basically, there was nothing that was there. Well, there were very few tweets that were optimistic. Not all were pessimistic, but there were many.
Yeah, and I just think about my own experience. And when I first came out of school, and we're coming up on my 30th high school reunions coming up next year. But when I was coming out, I had an entry level position, and I didn't make a lot of money, didn't earn a lot of money, and I wonder if some of the pessimism is just expectations. People come out of school now, are they expecting much higher wages? I stayed and lived at home for, my mother is probably cringing, but, I stayed and lived at home for a little bit after college. And, I'm wondering if maybe just a kind of a setting or resetting of expectations. Is that maybe that your sense?
That might be it. I mean, I think it's expectations that millennials have for themselves, but also other people have for millennials. So there are societal expectations that you're supposed to move out of your parents' house at a certain age. You're supposed to get married at a certain age, buy a house at a certain age, have kids at a certain age, retire at a certain age. And that's just not the case anymore. Retirement has changed drastically, just the way that people perceive retirement, approach retirement. It's not like, you retire at 65, you move to Florida, and, you live out the rest of your days there. Some people retire and then they want to work for, part-time in another type of field that maybe they had a passion for, but it didn't make a lot of money and they had other responsibilities. Some people want to retire at 45 and they bank all of their money in different investing strategies so that they never have to work a day in their lives. So there are so many different expectations and pressures that are placed on millennials, and I feel that that probably does contribute to how optimistic or not they feel towards their future. And also there are just many financial obligations that they have. So if you're a millennial, you're in your late 20s, you're in your 30s, you might be approaching 40. You're not some kid coming out of college anymore. You do want to have a decent salary. A lot of people do want to buy a home. People do want to start families, get married, have kids, do all of that kind of stuff. And at the same time, a lot of people, or most Americans now, are on the hooks for their retirement. The system has changed for how people do save for retirement. It's not pensions anymore. People have to pay for their own retirement through defined contribution plans. And although 401ks are a great tool, it does require your own money to go into those accounts. So people have to make decisions. And sometimes they're hard decisions. Like, you want to live your life to the fullest and you want to enjoy yourself and maybe go on a vacation or maybe pay for your kids' education. But at the same time, now you have this pressure of not having enough money in retirement because of how you allocate your savings. And it's just, that's an expectation. I know for me personally, like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to do the things that I want now, but also save for my future. And I imagine that people feel that way, especially when they have those big financial burdens like student loan debt and other stuff on them.
Yeah, I wonder if, and you have been the subject of, we talked about Twitter last year on the podcast about an article you wrote about how much you should have saved at age 35, and that caused a whole stir. But I wonder if, Twitter just is a social media platform, and I'm wondering how many Gen Xers and baby boomers and other generations actually feel maybe they're not expressing themselves in the same way. But I got to think, Allie, that there are similar feelings among different cohorts.
Yeah, I'm sure that generations before us, they didn't have social media to complain on, but I'm sure that they had their own struggles that they were dealing with. I mean, the student loan debt has gotten a lot worse, especially for millennials, and that is because of the crazy increases in college tuition and other expenses around college. But that's not to say that it was cheap going to college, 20, 30 years ago. It was just, it was different. And they had their own expectations that they had for themselves and others too. I mean, back then, it wasn't as common to stay in your parents' home until you were maybe 30 or so. I think people typically moved out a lot younger. So that would mean that you have your own, your own bills quicker. So I think all generations face this, but millennials in particular, at least with Twitter, they have been very vocal about how upsetting retirement and retirement savings is. When I wrote that story last year about saving for retirement in your 30s, there was that guideline about Fidelity had saved twice your salary by the time you turn 35, and people were livid about that. It was supposed to be a guideline, and that means that you don't have to have that. But some people, they hear that figure and they're disappointed in the person or the institution that created that guideline, but also in themselves. And a lot of people got defensive about that, saying like, how on earth am I supposed to have that much money when I have all these other things going on financially? And I also want to live life because you only got one. So yes, Twitter is definitely the place to hear about millennials' thoughts on retirement.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot going on, and I think you make some really good points in terms of student loan debt. That is certainly through the roof at over $1 trillion, impacting so many people, and that does retard your ability to save. And so clearly there's some work there. And I also think that, just my personal opinion, that maybe revisiting some of those expectations, but I think you make some points in the article, really good points, that no matter what you earn, you've got to make the effort because no one else is going to bail you out. I mean, we talked about Social Security on the show. We've talked about these other mechanisms, but you've got to make some effort. Allie, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today, and we'll look forward to more of your excellent writing in the future.
Thanks.
And folks, that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a financial or retirement topic? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for the latest news and headlines, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same